Hi, welcome to Healthy Alternatives, where we explore complementary and alternative medicine as well as other lifestyle choices that promote and enhance human health. And our guest tonight is Karen Carney with the DeSoto Pratt Resource Center. And actually, Karen, your center is something that most people wouldn't really associate with health because it's a grief counseling center, and you deal mostly with people who are going through loss through death. So, we don't really equate death with health, but the way we deal with death certainly does impact our health, doesn't it, Karen?
Absolutely. There are healthy ways to deal with your grief and unhealthy ways to deal with your grief.
Right.
So our goal is to help people develop the healthiest possible means to be able to learn to adapt to this life-altering situation.
Exactly, and death is something that none of us will escape.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. It's inevitable, unfortunately.
Exactly. So, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a grief counselor?
Well, I'm a registered nurse and a licensed clinical social worker, and I had some significant losses earlier in life. And when I was in graduate school, I wrote on a form for the person who was the director of field placements that I would do anything except work with sick children because that made me nervous. I was a registered nurse at the time when I went back for social work. She misread that and thought that I wanted it. So she moved heaven and earth to get me this great field placement at Newington Children's Hospital. So when I got the letter in the mail telling me about this wonderful situation that I was about to enter, I panicked, and I couldn't believe my eyes, and I called her. This was about a week before classes were starting in September, and I said, "How did this happen? Why are you putting me there?" And she said, "Well, that's what you wanted." And I said, "No, I said I would do anything but." Because when I was working in critical care as a nurse, when children came into the emergency department or into the intensive care, and back in those days we didn't have a separate facility for them, my heart would just break, and it was very difficult to be caring for sick children in that capacity, I learned. So she pleaded with me to at least try it because it would have altered my graduation date. If I hadn't accepted it, she would have had to find another place. Plus, she said I would be so embarrassed because I really talked you up and they're really looking forward to having you, and it took a lot to get you there. So can you at least try it? I said, sure, I'll do that.
So you did yours?
So I did it, and I loved it. I loved it. I was assigned to muscle disease clinic, and of course there sadly were a lot of families who were dealing with the impending loss of their children. But I found that in that capacity, in the counseling capacity, that was a better fit for me than working as a nurse. But I had an empathy for the healthcare providers and what they needed to do for the patients and the families. So it really ended up being a good blend. So that's what got me launched on this career path to helping children and families and others deal with losses.
And you probably might not have even developed in that area.
And I joke, I went into this kicking and screaming. It wasn't something that I was looking for. I think we may be destined for certain things in life, and we can't escape our destiny, I think. So I look at it philosophically that way.
And you've been doing this work now for?
Oh, gosh. I graduated from social work school in 1985, but I have had an affiliation with the DeSotos. I met them over 20 years ago. I can't believe, I know I don't look that old, but...
No, you don't.
Well, thank you, but it's been a long time. And the Resource Center, it'll be 17 years this October.
Wow, so let's talk about the Resource Center. I think most people recognize it, people that live in Wethersfield anyway. It's on the corner of
Garden in Maine. I don't know if you can see the camera, but this is a picture of the house.
Off-white colonial building.
Beigey colonial building with a blue front door right on the corner of Main and Garden. And part of the design, Janet DeSoto, Klett, and myself, we would get together for coffee and brainstorm. She approached me, actually, over 20 years ago now, and asked me what I thought grieving people needed, because she was aware of my work, but then I was working at Hartford Hospital. And she called and asked if I would meet with her and brainstorm, and I said, sure. So I had an abundance of ideas. And we put our heads together and our hearts together, and we had wish lists, and decided we would find a way to make it happen. So
that's amazing. Yeah. So the DeSoto family really helped to.
Oh, absolutely. Without their support,
Spear-
without
they
their funding.
spearheaded the-
Yes, yes, they founded it.
They founded it, and as everyone knows, the Sopo family has the
Yes,
Sopo
they have a funeral
home
chapel in Wethersfield and another one in East Hartford, yes.
Right. So I guess that, and it must be rewarding for them too, because over the years they've just seen so many people. I mean, they help to a certain extent, but they know that their job
Absolutely.
is just a part of the whole process of getting people over that.
Right, and
Chasm.
they were visionaries, really, and I met them.
How did you meet them?
Well, Peter Lynch was a speaker at the Keeney Center. There was a program on getting through the holidays, and the first one was in 1990, and I had moved to Wethersfield in 1988, and I saw this in one of the Wethersfield publications, and saw that Peter Lynch, who is a famous social worker, as social workers go, and he would be speaking free to the public on getting through the holidays, and I was really impressed with that. I had gone to conferences and I'd spent big bucks to hear Peter Lynch speak,
Right.
so for this to be offered free to the public. And also it was innovative. No one was talking about grief and the holidays and how difficult that was. So I went twofold. I was working with people who were grieving, and also I was a person who was trying to deal with the holidays with my own losses too. I was not looking forward to the holidays. And I thought, well, this would be nice. So I walked in and there were over 100 people in the room. And instantly I thought, wow, I'm not alone with this. So that's one of the biggest gifts that I think that we can give to people when they come to the Resource Center, to know that you're not alone. And this candle that's on the table, it's called the Friendship Candle, and they're pretty common by now, but when we were given this gift, no one knew what it was, but it's made in Mexico out of clay, and legend has it that when you give this as a gift to someone, the bonds of friendship last forever. And I love how the figures are supporting each other. They've got each other's backs. So we light this before every program, and I talk a little bit about the symbolism of the candle, that they're holding each other up. And to get through life's challenges, that's what you need. You just need friends and family and anyone who can be compassionate and understand you to just rally around you and hold you up.
And support.
Another story I like to talk about as it relates to the candle is First Church has a daily inspirational message. And I called that, well, every now and then I need to recharge my battery, so I would call that number. And one of the ministers was talking that day about the giant sequoia trees in California. And I had been to California when I was in my early 20s, and I was so impressed with, I was awestruck by the sequoia trees, just being in the middle of the ring of the sequoias.
They are quite impressive.
Oh, it's amazing. They go way up to the sky.
The diameter.
Oh, yeah, it's just amazing. So my ears perked up when he was talking about the sequoias. And he said, now, how have they managed to survive for centuries? The wind, the rain, all of the elements of nature, and they're still standing. Well, you would think that they had roots down to the center of the earth, but they don't. The roots are very shallow. It's as though they're just standing on top of the earth. Well, they survive because they grow together in a circle, and they hold each other up. And I thought of the candle. Wow.
I didn't realize that about the sequoias.
Isn't that amazing? So, yeah, they hang on to each other and keep each other going. So I think there's so many lessons from nature that we can learn from.
Yeah, I agree. You said something earlier about people not talking about death back when you saw...
Back in the day.
Back in the day. But it's still, we're still, I think, kind of back in the day.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
we really, I think, are in denial of death. Even though, you know, we know it's going to happen to us.
Right?
It's inevitable, but we don't really think about it enough. So when it does happen, we are rather unprepared for it.
Right.
So, you know, this is the kind of thing that your job, I guess, your vocation really, it's more than a job, is to really help us all process what's going on. So, and I'm sure there's, you know, people watching who have either maybe recently lost someone or they know someone who is going through a very intense period of grief. So maybe we could talk in two paths tonight, you know, the nature of grief, you know, for someone that's really experiencing it, and for those who are trying to support people, things that we could do. So Could you just talk a little bit about what your observations are, the things that you see people really struggling with when they're grieving?
Absolutely. There is such a loss of hope when you've had a devastating loss. You just feel as though your life as you knew it, and the meaning and the purpose of your life is shattered. And you need to reinvent yourself and find a way to carry on. And that's really hard because you just want your old life back. So for people who've had a really significant loss, and the more significant the attachment is, then the harder it is to deal with the grief, of course.
Right, and those significant attachments, of course, tend to sometimes be relationships that aren't very frequent in someone's life, the death of a spouse or a child, a sibling, a very close friend. So, you know, many of us have yet to experience these kinds of things.
Right, right. If you're blessed to live your life out according to the
plan,
actuary
you know,
tables,
depending
right,
on your
in
age,
80s,
right?
90s,
Exactly.
then yes, there are many adults who have not experienced a significant loss yet.
Yeah.
And for someone like myself who had losses earlier in life, that's just amazing to me. But no matter how old you are, it's hard to lose a parent. No matter how old,
no matter how old the parent is, too.
no matter how old the
Right.
parent is. When you're attached to someone and you love them and they love you and they're part of that support system of yours, it's very hard and very painful. So that needs to be validated. That, yeah, it doesn't matter how old your mother was, doesn't matter how long you were married, doesn't matter. What matters is that you miss them.
Yeah, and I think that word, the validation, you know, that whole process of grieving, it's like, you know, the funeral, the week after, and, you know, like,
Yeah.
let's get on with the
Right.
rest of the show now. And,
Right.
you know, for people that have experienced significant loss, that's
Yeah, that's not
Not
realistic.
always.
That's just not realistic.
or ever
Right.
the case.
Right.
And there's probably feelings of maybe inadequacy and then shame, or they feel maybe like they're being weak or
Right.
crybabies. So
Right.
the
right.
center is really
It's a safe place, right.
to grieve.
Right, right. People
Which I
kept
think
saying
is a great
Well, when we were trying to find a name for
Expression.
the foundation,
Yeah.
someone said, well, duh, everyone calls this a safe place to grieve, so why don't you call the foundation Safe Place to Grieve? That's how that evolved. And so what we try to do is validate that, yes, this is hard, this is painful, but together we'll get through this. That's one of the coloring books that I've written for kids. It's called Together We'll Get Through This. And people need to hear that. They need to know that there are going to be a community of support around them to help them to manage life now. So there are lots and lots of struggles that people
So
have.
it's a real lifeline.
It's a lifeline for a lot
many
of people.
So
Yes.
now, what about the nature of what you do there, what you actually do? You have various groups, I would imagine, depending upon
Yes, we
type
have
of
different
children,
groups.
group for children.
I don't have a group specifically for children. What I didn't want to do was duplicate services that were
Okay.
beginning in other areas. So as the DeSopo Resource Center was evolving, Mary's Place in Windsor. Mary was a good friend of mine, Mary Keene. She's since retired and she's in California, but Mary's Place lives on.
And that's for children?
That's for
specifically?
children and families. So she does wonderful groups, and her organization does wonderful groups in Windsor. So I make a lot of referrals there. And also there are COVE programs that are scattered around the state. So we do make lots of referrals back and forth for one another. And there
So
are
you're kind of like a
plenty.
clearinghouse for people that don't know where to go.
Well,
if
yes,
you don't offer the service there.
People have called me the emotional ER, the
triage.
triage. Yes, absolutely. The info line of grief. And I do get lots of referrals from
Well,
info
I mean,
line.
that's a valuable service in and of itself.
Right. Well, that's where the
Right.
1,400 calls last year came
1,400
from.
calls.
1,400 calls, and of
People
that,
reaching out.
231 first-time callers.
Wow.
Just last year alone. Yeah.
So now at the house on the
So
corner.
what we do is I will try to get a sense of what's happening. So when I get a call, when someone is calling me for the first time, I know it's very difficult to pick up that phone and make that call.
The first call.
Oh, that is just so. You don't want to believe that this is happening. This is the club nobody wants to join. So when you finally muster up the courage to pick up the phone and to call, then it's scary. And you don't know who's on the other end of that phone. So